Raleigh was a relative Johnny-come-lately. Another thing, Johnny-come-lately. That's because Raleigh, while he had become rather quickly a favorite of Queen Elizabeth I, was really only part of a larger business, family business, of maritime enterprise, particularly pirating. His older stepbrother, Humphrey Gilbert, was the real adventurer. He began in 1578 an effort to establish a colony in the New World. Raleigh was an on-again, off-again side participant in those ventures. But it was Humphrey Gilbert who was really the innovator, the far-sighted promoter. But unfortunately, as Queen Elizabeth characterized Humphrey Gilbert so succinctly, I know we all know this, she characterized Humphrey Gilbert as a man of bad habit on the sea, which has meant that everything he did turned into a disaster. And indeed, his last effort under his charter to establish a colony in the New World, which ventured up to Newfoundland, ended in his own death when he unwisely attempted to return across the Atlantic to England in a very small little ship called the Squirrel. His charter effectively then passed down to his younger half-brother, Walter Raleigh, in 1584. Raleigh, a bit savvier at how to impress, a bit flashier, more of the self-promoter. He understood that he was taking on a challenge that was, in many ways, drinking from a poisoned well. And investment, that means 30 suckers left. Everybody who might want to lose money on a colony in the New World probably would have lost their money. But Raleigh, for whatever his reasons, took on that challenge. And at first, he bet his own money. He launched a very well-planned venture, multiple stages. The first stage of which, and some of us are familiar with, was a short expeditionary journey of 2 ships that encountered the Outer Banks of North Carolina, encountered the natives thereof, reconnoitered to see what potential settlement sites there might be for the next phase of the operation. It was headed by Captains Amadis and Barlow, and their job from Raleigh's standpoint was to come back with good PR. Their job, no matter really what happened, was to come back and give him the kind of positive material he could put into his investment pitch. And that's why we have lines that we like to quote about North Carolina, goodly as soil under the coast of heaven. But that was a short-term record order that was then followed. Well, I hate to do this. Too often we skip over the most important outcome of the first venture to the New World under Raleigh. Raleigh, unfortunately, sometimes we encounter folks who believe Raleigh discovered America, or that Raleigh came over as part of the Roanoke enterprise. He actually did not. He did eventually go to South America. The people who were discovering the New World were Manio and Wanchese. Manio and Wanchese were members of 2 neighboring tribes on the coast of North Carolina, the Croatans and the Secretans, best as we can tell, because nobody can speak Algonquin very well at the time. But they were essentially appointed by their respective tribal leadership to accompany that first reconnoitering expedition back to London and discover who these people were. I want you to try to imagine Manio and Wanchese riding on a wooden ship across the Atlantic in the company of these strange English people and entering London in the Elizabethan era. That is incomprehensible. But it's something I wish some of those many stories about the Lost Colony would include a greater emphasis on. These are the real discoverers in the first phase of Raleigh's enterprise. And perhaps to Raleigh's credit, or perhaps to his cleverness, unlike almost every other Native American from North America who visited Europe, they did not go as captives. They were not in cages and chains. They were not put on public display as though they were zoo animals. Raleigh brought them to London as ambassadors. He dressed them in Elizabethan finery, and he cleverly used them as his experts on North America when he approached investors who were otherwise terribly skeptical about prospects of investing in the New World. So they frequently were at court. They frequently were part of Raleigh's efforts to raise money, say amongst the venture capitalists at the time, known then as merchant adventurers. They effectively became really his consulting experts It represented promise of the new world. That laid the groundwork for probably the most slandered aspect of the Roanoke enterprise. And that's the first colony. This is what's the terminology of historians and archaeologists. The first colony was a team of 108 men who were sent over with a fairly well-defined mission following up on the first expedition. And their mission was explore the area more intensely, map it, meet and describe the people you encounter, because the English wanted them to be customers. Develop a language, a linguistic alphabet, identify things that might be of potential commercial value, so we can turn this into a profitable enterprise. And perhaps most importantly, find us a good site for our capital city, what would become the city of Raleigh in the New World. They did, objectively, pretty well on their mission. They, in the process of recording the people, the animals, and the plants that they encountered, this is documented by the artist John White, the official illustrator of the first colony expedition. They did quite a fine job, not only of identifying and describing, but did an outstanding job on cartography. I used to be a geologist before I got into business, and I worked out small boats doing soil sampling in this part of North Carolina. I had a real appreciation for the accuracy and detail of their mapping and what accomplishment that was. So from a scientific standpoint, the first colony was tremendously successful. That laid the foundation, finally, for the colony that became lost. 118 men, women, and children who left in 1587, arriving in the New World, locating on Roanoke Island, rather confusingly locating on Roanoke Island. Then we see the birth of Elizabeth Dare, variously known as the first English child born in the New World or North America. There'll have caveats in there, eventually nobody will disagree with you. And then rather shortly thereafter, the governor of that colony, John White, the same guy who was the illustrator before, he departs for England for resupply. We all know this part of the story. Then there's an interesting question of when does this colony become lost? Well, in 1590, after a number of terrible delays for a variety of reasons, rather calamitous reasons, John White finally returns to seek out the colony. He arrives on Roanoke Island. They're not there. They weren't supposed to be there. They were supposed to have moved somewhere else. They were supposed to leave a message as to where they had gone and under the conditions on which they had left, whether they were in distress. And he gets that information. He's unable to do the additional investigation to actually locate them, and he's forced to return to England with only the vaguest ideas and information on the fate of the colony. That doesn't mean the colony's lost. They're just misplaced. But eventually they come to be known as our lost colony. At that point it's 117 men and women, children plus or minus births and deaths. Now since we're interested in the fate of the lost colony, the good news is history gives us a lot of evidence. There are a lot of clues. You may start to wonder, why is it a mystery? We have a lot of clues. Governor John White eventually writes a full report, 1593, recounting what he discovered when he returned to Roanoke Island, seeking colonists. And he reports two pieces of critical information. That would be good if they weren't contradictory. The first piece of information is that when he left the colony in 1587, the plan was for the colonists to move off of Roanoke Island and go somewhere else. The best information he left us is that their plan was to move 50 miles into the mainland. Now that's usually interpreted to mean 50 miles west. It can be interpreted as 50 miles east. You can choose to interpret it any way you like. But when you look at the wording of the other reports the colony left, mainland typically meant mainland the way we would describe it. 50 miles into the interior of North Carolina. At the same time, he reported on returning to the island that indeed the colonists had left a clue as to where they had gone. Two clues, really meaning the same thing. That they had left for Croatan, what we would know as modern-day Hatteras Island. Croatan being a reference to the tribe that lived on Adam's Island. So it seems pretty straightforward. They went 50 miles one direction and they went 70 miles in a different direction. That's the information we have from the direct observer, John Watt. Later, 20 years later, in fact, as part of the Jamestown enterprise, the one that did eventually succeed, if you don't count all the people who had to die for it to succeed, was actively seeking information on survivors of the Roanoke colony. They inquired of the natives in the area. They mounted some exploratory expeditions themselves. And in summary, this is what we knew from reports, particularly those from John Smith himself at Jamestown in 1609, where his narrative reports. Fairly straightforward narrative. They reported hearing that the Roanoke colonists, wherever it was they had gone, had survived for 20 years, living with allies in the Indian communities. But the advent of the Jamestown colony alarmed a powerful Indian chief. Excuse me, I'm using common terminology here. A powerful Indian chief named